Hello everybody, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for logging on to our video today. My name's Ciara Clark and I'm joined by my colleagues Sarah Riston and Aoife Malone, and we work in the Clinical Psychology and Psychological Therapy Service. So we're offering this video. I suppose at the start of the pandemic, we really saw the importance of supporting our staff because we knew that this was going to be a really difficult time. So we set up the staff helpline, which you may or may not have used, and we also had some drop-in centres, and we've been doing support with staff teams as well. And we really, I suppose, wanted to be able to reach out to as many people that work in the trust as possible. And you probably remember that, you know, when you're in an airplane and they give you the safety talk and they say that, you know, if we lose pressure, put your oxygen mask on first before you help a child or before you help an older person. And I guess that really applies to ourselves as well in work, that we need to put our oxygen mask on first and look after ourselves if we need to be able to look after other people. And I suppose I just wanted to say that all of our staff in the South Eastern Trust really matter. You know, we're not going to get through this without everybody's help, whether you're on the front line, whether you're behind the scenes, whether you're working from home. We really need everybody to pull together. So this video, I suppose, is for anybody at all who works in the trust. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to do a really short grounding exercise in a wee second or two. We're going to talk a bit about what is stress. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how our thinking can sometimes make life a bit more difficult for us and get us into difficulty. We're going to talk about what it's like to live through a global pandemic. We're going to look at some of the research. We're going to talk about how it's impacted on our relationships in work and at home. And then we're going to talk a little bit about staff experiences. And obviously we've had hundreds of conversations with staff on the helpline and even just being out and about in the office. So it's kind of distilled them down to some main things, and we're going to talk about those. And I suppose one of the sort of main feelings that people are talking about at the minute is anxiety, and that's understandable really, isn't it? And at the minute lately it's been about exhaustion, because I think this has gone on for longer than we originally anticipated. And then very importantly at the end, we're going to talk about how we can look after ourselves and others, and that's really important. So I think it's a good idea if we can just kind of try to really be here and really be present in the moment. So if you can, I don't know whether you might be at home or you might be in work or you might be on your lunch, wherever you are, if you can just kind of try to be really present. So kind of trying to put out of your mind what you've just done, what you're making for dinner, what time your next shift starts, and really just be here. Sometimes it's helpful to like mentally imagine leaving all that baggage outside your door, closing the door, and just trying to give your attention to this. You've made the effort to come here. It's only going to be 45 minutes. So I think I'd really like you to really be here and enjoy it. And don't do like I did a couple of weeks ago, where I was on 2 webinars at the same time, multitasking. Do not do that, it doesn't work. So a really simple way to ground yourself is really just to really simply just notice your feet on the floor. You can do it now as you're sitting here. So just feel your feet on the floor. Feel your bum in the seat, where your bum and your legs kind of connect with the seat, and feel your back in the chair. And just take a wee minute to kind of feel grounded. And that's a really useful thing that you can do, you know, throughout your working day or at any stage really, when you find yourself getting a little bit anxious, just feeling your feet on the floor, bum in the seat, back in the chair. It sounds really simple, but it can be really effective. So we're going to talk about stress, that dreaded word that we're hearing so much about lately. I really like this little picture because I suppose what stress is, it's psychological, it's emotional, and it's a physical response to pressure. And I think we all can relate to that at the minute. And it can be when we feel there's too many demands on us and not enough resources to deal with those demands. So when the scales are kind of skewed. And that pressure can arise from external factors, including life events, illness, living conditions, work, home, family, just the demands that are placed on us. And even those events which can be seen as enjoyable, like going on holiday or moving house, starting a job, parenthood, Christmas, I mean, they're all seen as stressors as well. So it's not all the bad stuff. So when we're stressed out, these are some of the thoughts I'm sure we can all relate to. You know, you might start to think, this is too much for me, I can't cope. This isn't fair, somebody needs to help me here. There's far too much to do. and there's too little time to get it done. I'm never going to finish this, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. I have to get this done. And it affects how we feel. So when we're stressed out, you know, you can be really irritable and bad-tempered. You know what it's like when you come home from work, you've had a bad day, somebody looks at you, and then the next thing you're biting their head off. You can feel really, really anxious, more impatient. You can get angry a lot quicker. And sometimes you can get really, really down and a bit hopeless and feeling like, what's the point? You know, life is just really difficult and there's nothing I can do about it. But we also feel it physically, not just emotionally, but we can feel it physically. And those physical symptoms, it's known as the fight-flight response, but it's where you feel your heart racing, your breathing come a bit quicker, your muscles get really, really tense. A lot of people I've been speaking to recently have been noticing like tension headaches and sore necks and around here. You get really warm and sweaty, difficulties concentrating, feeling forgetful, being really agitated and restless, and bowel issues as well. So those feelings are really quite difficult. And, you know, when you think about it, you're experiencing those things and you're still having to do your job and deal with all your home commitments as well. So it takes its toll on us. And it also, being stressed also affects what we do. So, you know, it can be really hard to settle. I think sometimes when we're stressed, we rush a bit more, try to get more done, which sometimes can go against us and you end up getting less done or making mistakes. Or I'm sure you know that feeling, I certainly do, where you start one thing and you don't finish it and you move on to another thing. And there's no satisfaction in that either. You've just got lots of bits of things done and nothing actually completed. It can affect our sleep. I'm hearing that a lot recently from people who are finding it really difficult to sleep. Sometimes we can engage in unhelpful behaviors like drinking more, eating more, using drugs, smoking more. You know, again, we can get a bit argumentative with people that we love and take it out on our families, things like that, and just generally a bit more tearful. And it is a vicious circle. Our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors are all linked. So if you have a look at this vicious circle, some of the common thoughts that we're all thinking at the minute are, you know, there's too much to do, there's not enough time, it's completely out of control, I can't cope. Well, how do you think that's going to make us feel? Very tense, you know, headaches, difficulties concentrating, forgetful, all those sort of physical symptoms in your body. And then that affects that we do. So sometimes people can go into overdrive and do more work and work outside their hours and keep going and doing too much or less time. You know, you can avoid things and put things off. I'll hold my hand up and say I'm guilty of that, procrastinating. You know, starting lots of things and not finishing them can affect our sleep. Again, those unhealthy behaviors, and just generally doing less. And I think as well, when we're stressed, the things that are good for us, that fill up our cup, are shoved to the side, and you know, we engage in behaviors that don't help us. And this is human. You know, I'm not saying this is totally wrong. We all do this. But it's just important to notice how they all interact with one another and think, well, which one of these parts of the circle can I actually do something about? And the idea is that you can do something about all of them. So when you're feeling stressed, sometimes it can be really, really useful to just take a wee minute or two and ask yourself, what is making me stressed? Sometimes we don't know. You know, where am I when I'm feeling really stressed? What am I doing? Who am I with? Are there any helpful changes that I could make? Are there things that are within my control? Now, obviously, we can't change everything. We don't have the ability to get rid of the pandemic or change, you know, change family life, change working life, but there are things that are within your control that you can do. So it's a really useful thing to do. Just, it only takes a minute or two. And these are some of the, what we call in psychology, thinking traps. And we're all guilty of these, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Yes, we are. And I really like these thinking traps, because when you find yourself caught up in a negative spiral, it's useful to think, well, which one of these traps am I falling into at the minute? And these are all really common, and we all do them to a certain extent. So the first one is prediction. So believing that we know what is going to happen in the future. You know, just think to yourself, am I thinking that I can predict the future? How likely is it that this will happen? So, you know, for example, a thought you might have is, you know, I'm feeling really, really stressed now, right? That means it's going to get worse. I'm probably going to have a nervous breakdown. I'll never be okay again. I'll probably never be able to work again. So you can see that thought just snowballing and predicting the future. Compare and despair is one that I hear a lot these days. So only seeing the good in other people and comparing ourselves negatively against them. And it's really important to challenge those unhelpful styles of thinking and think, well, what would be a more balanced and helpful way? So an example of compare and despair might be, well, everybody else in my team was getting on okay and they're able to handle things, you know, why can't I? I'm really pathetic, something like that. Very unhelpful. Another one is the mental filter. So that's when we notice, it's nearly like having a pair of negative glasses on, where we only notice the things that fit with our beliefs. So it's like looking through these gloomy spectacles, or you know, only taking in the negative aspects of what's going on at the minute and not filtering out and not noticing or discounting the positives. So like if you do something in work, you make a mistake, or you think you haven't done a good job, you know, where you give yourself a really hard time and you say, you know, well, I should have done better. And then it escalates into, I'm absolutely rubbish at my job. I shouldn't even be here. You know, when really you could say, well, that was a mistake yesterday, but generally I try to do my best and, you know, I do an okay job. Mind reading is another one. And we do this all the time. It's assuming that we know what other people are thinking. And it can be really good to question that as well and say, hold on a minute, what's the evidence for that? So an example would be, I had a panic attack. My wife thinks I'm losing my mind, and she's really disappointed in me. You know, this is terrible. She thinks really badly of me. And another one that we're doing a lot of recently is catastrophizing. And who can blame us? I mean, we're living in the middle of a pandemic. It's hard not to. So it's imagining and believing the worst thing that could happen. And it's important to question that and think, well, is that really helpful right now? You know, what's most likely to happen? But I think a lot of us are catastrophizing. And I know certainly at the start of the pandemic, when this was happening, you know, I was waking up with a horrible feeling in my chest, and I was imagining, you know, mass graves and funerals and my family's really catastrophizing. And it was really important that I brought myself back to the here and now. Emotional reasoning is another one. So when you feel bad, so we're all feeling a bit anxious at the minute and, you know, feeling a bit panicky, it means that I must be in danger. And that's not true. So just because we feel bad doesn't necessarily mean things are bad or that we are in danger. So it's important to kind of just recognize that as well. So Sarah, you're going to talk a bit about some of the research that's been done and what it's like to live through the pandemic.
That's lovely. Thank you, Ciara. Yes, so just thinking about living through global uncertainty and the pandemic, and living with worry and anxiety amidst this difficult time. And indeed, it has been a really difficult year, and there has been lots of disruptions, both in our homes and our working lives. But what we do know is actually human beings have a really amazing ability to think about future events. And thinking ahead means we can anticipate obstacles or problems. And indeed, that is good, and it helps us plan ahead and have the opportunity to think about solutions. And this is helpful to help us achieve our goals. But what it can also do is leave us feeling anxious and apprehensive and unable to cope. And that's certainly some of the things that has come up through staff that we have been able to talk to in the helpline. And what we do also know is that often when we worry, it can feel like a chain of thoughts and images that can progress in increasingly catastrophic and unlikely decisions or directions. So it just continues to grow and grow. So what we do know is that worry isn't just in our heads, and Ciara's alluded to this earlier, and indeed if it becomes excessive, we can feel it as anxiety in our bodies. So again, those physical symptoms of worry, muscle tension, restlessness, really struggling to concentrate. So a lot of people have talked about sitting in work, trying to do a job that they're used to doing and really, really struggling to concentrate in even very basic tasks. And that's again because their head is full or their cup is full with so many other things that they're unable to concentrate on the task at hand, and feeling easily fatigued and struggling to sleep. This pandemic is an unusual situation with much uncertainty, and of course it's natural then that we are going to worry. And again, excessive worry then can leave us feeling demoralised, feeling upset and exhausted, and can get in the way of living the life that we want to lead. So just in relation to the ways in which people react during a pandemic, there's a whole range of ways, a broad range of ways that people would react. And indeed, distress may be common, but in most cases, it's not associated with lasting difficulties. So strong emotions are normal, they're adaptive, it's a very difficult time. And indeed, it's a normal way of reacting to the characteristics of this pandemic situation. And as we can see from this slide, there are many features of this pandemic environment that lead to a range of normal emotional, so how we're feeling, and indeed cognitive responses. So feeling uncertain about the situation and the future, perceived threat and a sense of unfairness, constant change, change in our lives, change. Are we in lockdown? Are we not? Are we allowed out for one walk a day? Are we not? And certainly a thing that I got from a number of staff was memos coming in and changing almost on a daily basis, and some staff almost not wanting to not be in work for a day because there was so much change in relation to the rules that they were worried that they might miss something or get something wrong. Loss of lifestyle, maybe if you're used to going out and enjoying meals in a restaurant or going for a number of walks or going on holiday, suddenly that had changed. And leading to a loss of control over your world and your life. And again, feeling anxious and distressed. Some people have talked about through the pandemic using dark humor to help them get through. Other people feeling just completely shutting down and zoning out and finding it really, really difficult. Feeling angry, a loss of focus, sadness, guilt, shame. Some people have talked about a buzz for almost feeling that they're quite invigorated by the challenge. And others have talked about a quest for meaning. And that's been quite difficult as well, because for some that's been a positive experience about their future and what's it all about in their life. And for others that has been a more difficult experience or a negative experience.
Sarah, I think as well, there's been a real loss of support. You were talking about all the losses there, but the losses of support from maybe childcare, family, dealing with the pandemic and not being able to have your support network around you.
Absolutely. Yeah, really important and really hard, as you say, when people also try, and those who maybe are trying to juggle as well, whether it's children at home or pets at home, whatever it is, things that maybe they would normally have had some help with. It's really, really hard trying to do all of that in the home environment. So what we do know, strong feelings are normal and to be expected, and different people do react differently. Some people may feel, actually, I'm built for this, I'm ready for this. But what we also know is for some it's very distressing, and it's really important that we don't expect people to either hold in their distress, even though it may be difficult to observe that. It's trying to help people find safe ways in which to get rid of their distress and talk to somebody. So in relation to the research, what does it say? And certainly when we've looked back over other pandemics such as SARS, etc., what we do know is that different crises do affect people in different ways. And again, there's a wide range of responses. We do most often respond resilience, and that's in a way that's designed to protect ourselves and our loved ones. But how we respond depends on a number of factors. So it may be how much support we have at the time, and that's really important. If we have our friends and family supporting us and we feel well connected, even if it is via the phone or by Zoom, we may feel more able to deal with those challenges. Our previous experience of distressing events can absolutely impact on how we respond. Our perceived capacity to cope with the situation. So we feel, actually, I can do this. I feel able to deal with this. We may be more able to deal with it in a positive way. Whereas we feel that we're not able to, then that could impact how we're dealing with the situation. And of course, the nature and severity of the situation itself. So this is some ways of coping that are deemed helpful responses, using coping mechanisms that have worked in the past, thinking creatively about how you can adapt to conditions of social isolation or distancing. So again, for some people, being able to, take their hand gel with them in their handbag and or in their pocket, wearing the masks, social distancing, things like that help you feel that you're adapting to the situation in as safe a way as you can. This is really important. Talking to friends and family for support by phone or online. And I know this is something I certainly did a lot of during the pandemic, and certainly at the moment. Really, really important to connect in with your loved ones in whatever way works best for you. Maybe making a plan for coping with social isolation that will help you feel useful. So for some people, doing jobs around the home that they hadn't been able to do actually helped them get through the pandemic. Some people develop some skills or maybe following some online classes. But equally, I know for some people, actually, they felt under a lot of pressure to suddenly use this time very effectively, and that added to their distress. So again, it has to be something that works for you, that is helpful. And getting enough rest and nutrition and exercise. Also, maintaining a normal schedule as possible. So again, if you're used to getting up and getting showered, have your breakfast and going out and doing, whether it was going for a walk or going to work, trying to ensure you're still following those routines and maybe not sitting up really late into the early hours of the morning and then not being able to get up again, trying to keep the structure. Relaxing, so again, scheduling time to do what normally helps you relax. For me, that would be going for a walk with my dog in the park, I know with some of my friends, it would be watching a series on Netflix, whatever it is that helps you feel relaxed and able to take each day as it comes. Taking part in an online support or community group can also be really useful. And again, what we did see, there was a huge surge actually in lots of online groups and programs for people to access. So for example, I know some people linked in with some, there was the stresscontrol.org through our trust. That was really, really helpful course that people could watch online. Other people were linking in with maybe lovely mindfulness classes. And also I know a lot of families linked in with Joe Wicks doing his PE class. And again, that was really, really helpful for some people. Got their kids up in the morning, starting off doing a bit of exercise, and parents linking in with children and doing it together. So whatever helps you get through this difficult time, there's lots of resources out there and there's lots of things you can link in with. And understanding and tolerating the different ways that people cope with stress. Some people may become more short-tempered or distractible. And again, I think this is particularly important if, for example, there's maybe children in the home and they're not quite sure why maybe the caregivers are a bit more short-tempered, and it's just trying to find ways to explain that to children so they understand what's going on in a safe way. So some unhelpful responses. So again, these behaviours, it's really, really important that we can see that they are understandable responses to a traumatic, difficult situation that is really quite overwhelming at times. But again, in excess, it can lead to other problems. So if we find we're spending a lot of time watching the news broadcasts about the pandemic, it's really important to try and limit that. I certainly found in the early stages that I was doing that quite a bit and looking at what was going on around the world, and actually find that really very difficult as we were looking in as well at other countries, and just some of the images were really, really stark. So it's maybe just limiting that to whatever time in the day, allowing yourself a certain amount of time, and also making sure it's from a reputable source, because we are inundated with lots of media or social media coming in, whether it's through our phones or Facebook or indeed on the news. So just to try and limit that. Again, a loss of structure to your day or increasing your alcohol and substance misuse. Also, other things that may be unhelpful. So again, if you find that you're withdrawing from family and friends, occasionally if you need a bit of your downtime or your own time, that's of course understandable. But if you find that you're withdrawing to the point where you're not connecting in at all, then that's something maybe to be mindful of. Again, maybe overeating or undereating, blaming yourself for what's going on or other people, or starting to notice that you're doing more risky things or getting violently angry. So across what we know from staff experiences across the globe is that there is a range of feelings and thoughts that have gone with dealing with a pandemic. So again, people have talked about increased camaraderie and a sense of rising to the challenge, certainly in those early stages. What we also know is that staff may respond on instinct and are more prone to error. Frustrations and role confusion can occur, so people are quickly trying to adapt to the situation as it's changing. And that can be really, really difficult. And staff are also witnessing things that maybe they've never seen before, and that can lead to a feeling of being out of control. There can then be disagreements between groups over the sense of urgency. So what do we do? How do we deal with this? And trying to ensure everyone's working collaboratively to make decisions. And staff do tend to lose usual boundaries over working hours and breaks. So what that means is we find staff suddenly start to work longer hours. They're maybe not taking their breaks, which of course is impacting then on their own self-care. And this can come
holidays there as well. I noticed that some people weren't taking their holidays or couldn't take the holidays because they were so short staffed. So those opportunities to really leave work aside and really look after yourself just didn't happen. Absolutely. For some people.
Absolutely, Ciara, thank you. And then leaking over as well into family life. So whenever those kind of work tensions are kind of bringing that home, and that's difficult at home as well. And then kind of moving across, then you've kind of come over the hill into the period of disillusionment and exhaustion. And again, staff have talked about in that early stage where they're in the full go mode, there's like automatic pilot and there's like a surge of adrenaline. And then all of a sudden, it's just like the body just can't keep going at that level. The cortisol is pumping, and then they just get a drop, excuse me, and experience sudden exhaustion. They may neglect, as you said earlier, Ciara, their physical, psychological self-care, maybe feel it's not a priority, I need to be in work, not taking a break at all for maybe many months on end and running themselves down. And also moral distress and injury are a risk at this stage, because what we can see is maybe with healthcare being limited or being depleted, people are maybe unable to act or respond in the way they normally would. So for example, as I said, death and dying maybe not handled in the way it usually is. Staff maybe not been able to let family in to be with people in their final hours, not been able to attend funerals, and just dealing with all of that is incredibly difficult. Also, staff might begin to feel emotionally disconnected from the work and may engage in avoidant or unhelpful coping. As we said earlier, tensions at home and within the wider family then may overrun into your work life as this continues, and stress has a cumulative effect, and smaller things start to trigger reactions, and those staff with pre-existing vulnerabilities are at a higher risk of crisis. And then just finally thinking about relationships, and this is very important because this is thinking about not just relationships, I suppose, with our partners, but also relationships with family and colleagues. And when we make a commitment to another person, or indeed if we're walking down the aisle full of hope and gushing with emotion, with the focus on delivering our forever vows, we probably didn't include, I promise to love you even when confined to a small space, 24 hours in a lockdown caused by a global pandemic. And indeed, that has affected the quality of our relationship with others. We didn't sign up for this, and a lot of people are saying that. And indeed, they're saying, I don't know if we can survive coronavirus. It's been really, really difficult. Other comments, I don't want to be with my partner all of the time. And indeed, the quality of our relationships is partly related to the time that we spend with our partners and with our colleagues. And too much, we can feel suffocated, but too little, we can feel maybe rejected or abandoned. So it's just to be mindful that with this situation, it isn't easy. It is new. It is a whole new ball game. It's a new game with new rules. And it's important to sit down and try and talk about that and see if you can navigate through that together in whatever way is best. Also, as we've talked earlier about, anxiety is really, really common at this difficult time. So thinking about what triggers one person's anxiety may not trigger another. Nobody has the monopoly on anxiety. And again, it's just about sitting down and exploring that together. And also that happily married or living together couples do argue. That's part of a healthy relationship. It's if it's in excess that extra support is required. And just finally then, for some people, actually lockdown has brought a deeper connection and respect for their loved ones and colleagues. So for some, it's been there's been aspects of it have been positive. So what I'm going to do now is pass back over to Ciara, who's going to talk about some of the conversations or the themes of conversations that we've had with staff. Obviously, our staff helpline was completely confidential, so none of the quotes are direct quotes, but it's just really helpful to give us a bit of a flavour of some of the things that staff shared with us over the past few months. Thanks, Ciara.
And this also takes in some of the research that was done recently. There were a lot of questionnaires went out to staff in Northern Ireland and the UK as well, looking at their well-being and how they were managing throughout the pandemic. And what came out of that is, again, already been touched on with Sarah, but the initial phase was this being busy. You know, we're watching the news and preparing for the worst case scenario. And in that case, it was actually helpful to catastrophize. We're being asked to engage in that thinking trap, catastrophizing, because we had to prepare for the worst. And we were all changing the way that we were doing things. You know, people were being redeployed, some people were working from home, people had to shield, getting organized, all the IT that we needed, the phones, the laptops, remote access. You know, there was a lot of energy around, but a lot of fear around as well, a lot of adrenaline. And we were just having to adapt to a completely new way of life. And our children were off school and we were all at home, and it was, yeah, remember? And I think there was this idea, wasn't there, that, look, everything will get back to normal soon. You know, we'll get through this, we'll put everything into it, and it'll all be fine. And we're all full of enthusiasm. And then we did have, you know, when people started, you know, being infected and getting ill, there was that surge. People were busy working. And there was a bit of a relief, I remember at the time, that perhaps Northern Ireland was doing a little bit better than other countries, and, you know, the preparing for the worst. You know, that perhaps it wasn't too bad in Northern Ireland. It's still obviously very difficult, but that maybe we were doing okay. There was a bit of hope there. And now, I suppose, I mean, we've had nearly a year. People are just telling us, and not just people telling us, we're feeling it ourselves, we're not immune to this. Exhausted, really tired. It's been going on a long time. You know, life has not gone anyway back to normal at all. We're still working as hard as we ever were. We've still got that fear and anxiety around, and we're not able to do the things that we enjoy or have the support that we needed. So people are really running on empty and feeling a bit burnt out. And I suppose then, now the new thing is the vaccine, which is brilliant, which everybody's really excited about, but there's a lot of anxieties with that as well. Is it going to be helpful? Are there going to be side effects? When do we get it? Who gets it first? Or so at least there's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but that's not without its anxieties as well. So some of, as I say, the conversations are that, staff are saying we're not heroes, we're struggling too. And I think that everybody was clapping for the NHS, and that was really good, and it was very heartwarming. But I think that people felt a pressure to be a hero, to be this superhero, but in reality, we're also humans and we can be vulnerable. So I think that was putting a lot of pressure on people at a time. Initially, there was all the concerns about safety, about do we have enough PPE? Am I going to pass COVID on to patients or family? I'm here to keep people safe and well. What if I pass it on to them? Who will take care of my family if I become sick? Other people have been worried about lack of social distancing at work and how to manage that. And some staff have been redeployed as well. And redeployed into very different jobs, working in ICU when maybe perhaps they worked in something completely different, where they weren't used to working in those highly stressful situations where people died. Very, very, very difficult time. A lot of concern, I suppose, about the unfairness of it. Some people were furloughed. We used to see them when we're driving home and getting suntans. It was lovely weather, and but there was a real sense that some people were getting it easy and some people were getting it very difficult. And some people had the shield, and again, that was difficult for the people that had the shield. They felt that they were letting their team down, and there was possibly a bit of envy as well about the people who got the shield while everybody else had to go out to work. Some people were working from home, and the challenges that brought with childcare and technology and everything else. And some people were working on the front line. So it wasn't that everybody experienced the same amount of stress. It was very different for different people. The work-life balance was much more difficult to have. People were definitely working more hours, working from home, less boundaries when you're at home. You can continue to work on to whatever time you want. You don't have to leave a building and lock up and leave your computer behind you. Less breaks and holidays, caring for children, caring for elderly parents and worrying about them, homeschooling, and all at a time, like we were saying earlier, when you have less support around you. You can't ask your friends to mind your kids or your mother to come and help, because we all had to socially isolate. And communication, like you were saying, Sarah, things change so often. You were having a meeting in work and you were hearing one thing, and then the next day it was different. You were watching the news sometimes to see what the latest would be. So it's just constant change. And we know as human beings, we're not good with constant change. It's difficult to manage. And the overriding feeling, I suppose, was anxiety. That's what was really coming through. So some people were saying, the virus, there's the idea that the virus only affects older people. Some of the members in our team were really young and they were really floored by it. There was that feeling of, when is it going to be my turn? 16 of our team have already had it. I'm going to be next. Some people have financial concerns, maybe partners and things have lost their job. For other people that were experiencing anxiety and panic attacks for the first time, who had no experience of this, didn't know what was happening to them, were thinking, am I losing my mind here? And that was really, really scary. And there was a lot of shoulds. I hearing a lot of shoulds. I should be able to deal with this. I should be able to cope, which again was making it difficult. And the idea that I've been doing this for 20 years, I should be able to handle this. So people giving themselves a really hard time. And like we said, exhaustion. People are just exhausted. And as we say, it is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And that was just a funny cartoon of somebody working from home. Yay, it's 5 o'clock, my working day is done, time to go home. And they just swivel around in their chair and they go, home sweet home, and they're in the same place. But that's what it's like for people that are working from home a lot. So those are just some of the funny pictures that depict what it's like to work from home. You can see the cat there helping that person with their work. And the woman who has tied her children up and gagged them. I'm not suggesting that we do that. I haven't done it yet. And then I really like that one. Mum's in a meeting, do not enter. And the answer of your question might be, it's upstairs, it's in the wash. No, have a piece of fruit. It's in your bedroom. I don't know what's for dinner. So I think anybody who's working from home and who has children can relate to those ones. So some top tips for kind of whether you're working from home or whether you're in the office or hospital or clinic or wherever you are, is to do take regular breaks. And I think those natural breaks that normally happen throughout the day just aren't happening these days, you know, especially if you're working from home. You don't have somebody to go and have a cup of tea with, or, you know, you don't get that wee chat at the photocopier that you normally would have. So people are working a lot more hours and not taking breaks. And we know that taking a break does make us more productive, and they help you to avoid burnout. So it's worth doing, you know, even 10 minutes, walk around the block, whatever it is, but just to get that break. And to remember that this is a long game and none of us are indispensable. And to, you know, to use our team, hand things over, you know, to our teams and our colleagues, so that when you do get an opportunity to rest, you really can use that time and forget about work, you know, hand it over, delegate. And I think this is lovely, considering, you know, doing a 3-minute ritual at the end of each shift, where all you do is you just take 3 deep breaths and you list 3 things that were hard that day and 3 things that went well. And it doesn't take much time, but it can really just make a difference. And I was speaking to someone who works in a ward, and she was saying that, you know, she uses washing her hands as a kind of a mindful activity. So when she washes she's seeing one patient, she washes her hands, she focuses on the feel of the water and suds in her hands. And she puts aside what she's just dealt with that person, so that when she goes to the new person, she's totally focused on them. And I thought that was a lovely exercise that we could all practice. And to remind yourself why you're doing the job and that you really are making a difference. I know it doesn't always feel like it, but you are making a difference, and the job that you do is important. So some of the things that were coming up in our conversations, you know, people were saying that, you know, I always pretend and I always say I'm okay even when I'm not. So that's, you know, putting on a mask, putting on a front. Some people were very tuned into the feelings of panic in their body, and maybe confusing that with having a heart attack and checking their blood pressure and things like that. Again, like I said, some people were having panic attacks for the first time ever and had these thoughts that maybe I'm losing it here, I'm going crazy. People not being able to sleep, people who were living alone and really missing having that physical touch from someone else, feeling that they failed. So talking to staff who maybe had to take a bit of time off work, and they were really giving themselves a hard time and feeling very much that they'd failed their team. I spoke to a person who was saying that, you know, normally they're quite a strong man, but he actually was feeling frightened, and it was very hard for him to admit. And, you know, people who were off work wanting to go back and really just feeling bad that other people had to cope without them. For other people, their children worrying about them going out into work, especially when they were seeing on the news that maybe, you know, medical staff have contracting COVID and dying. Yeah, and I remember speaking to another person who was saying that those sort of meetings where you were preparing for the worst really did her mental health no good, because she was being asked to catastrophize constantly, and that was making her feel very anxious. For other people, their workload doubled, and, you know, with less resources. And, you know, I think that it was difficult because when you saw people who perhaps weren't adhering to the lockdown rules, it was very difficult to see that, because, you know, people feeling, well, all you have to do is sit at home, and I feel like I'm a lamb to the slaughter going out here, and all you have to do is sit at home, and you can't even do that. So kind of feeling quite cross towards people, feeling sort of loss of confidence, worried about making mistakes, and feeling that, you know, I'm okay when it's a crisis, but afterwards I really fall apart. And again, the effects of social isolation. So, you know, saying my family know to look at me when I'm not okay, but because I'm not seeing my family anymore, they don't know that actually I'm not okay, and I'm not telling them. So that's sort of wearing a mask. But there was a lot of positives as well. You know, so some people were saying that they were going out a lot more for walks and looking at all the rainbows in everybody's house. There was a person talked about a neighbour who put a different teddy bear out each day, and that really gave her a lot of pleasure to see that. Trying to keep to a routine, being in nature, sitting in the garden, going for walks, doing jigsaws and crafting, those sorts of things that take you out of your mind and give you something physical to do. Writing down worries and ticking off the ones that you can do something about, really, really helpful way to deal with worry. There was comments about just the tsunami of kindness, that everybody was helping each other, and I think we all saw that. You know, neighbours were getting shopping for other people and checking in with each other, and, you know, around here people were posting wee letters through the door, and, you know, it really did, I suppose, bring out the best in people as well, didn't it? And the clapping on the Thursday night at 8 o'clock every week, you know, really making people feel proud of what they were doing, of their job. And I suppose as well, some people were saying that, you know, they got to spend a bit more time together. You know, their children weren't going to as many clubs and just wasn't as much happening. People weren't going out, so they were spending more quality time together as well. So it hasn't been all negative, but it's both, isn't it? So we figure we're going to talk about what we can do to help ourselves.
Yeah. Thanks, Ciara. So I know over the last like 30 odd minutes or so, we've been throwing so much information to you about, you know, the pandemic and what that's been like. And I really think, you know, the main thing we can think about now is, okay, well, what can we do at this point in time to try and help ourselves and help each other get through? I think the first step really is just to recognize when we're feeling stressed. So it's that idea of thinking back, okay, when we're stressed, what are those early warning signs that maybe, you know, things aren't going great? So for some people, you might be feeling more tired, more irritable, you know, maybe find that you're snapping at people a lot easier, or just, you know, not wanting to be around people as much. So just kind of noticing those signs. And, you know, it's about thinking about what can we do then to try and put some strategies in place before you get too stressed. And no one's saying you have to reinvent the wheel here. It's really about thinking back, what coping strategies have worked before in the past. So, you know, maybe it's exercise, you know, listen to music or connecting with others. And I think it's about taking those strategies and seeing, okay, what can we do now to adjust those or to adapt those to the situation of COVID and of social distancing. And I think, as, you know, Sarah mentioned earlier on, it's really important to recognize how some of our responses can be more helpful than others. So, you know, while sometimes some strategies might seem like understandable, you know, when, you know, we're in a difficult situation, but what can often happen is they can lead to difficulties further down the line. So that overconsumption of news, the under eating, the alcohol and substance misuse. So it's just, you know, worth keeping in mind and seeing, is this going to be the best thing in the long term for me, for managing my stress and for keeping well? And I think, as we're saying, you know, this is the time when self-care is needed the most. In that second aspect of the active phase, with disillusionment, the exhaustion, this is the time where the psychological risk is at the highest. And it's a time where self-care is needed the most. And I think there's this myth that self-care and self-compassion is selfish, but really it's the opposite. You know, it's that idea that you have to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help others. So if we're showing compassion to ourselves, we're able to be more compassionate towards others. And there's a really lovely idea that I love, is that idea of, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you don't have it, you can't give it. So we need to be able to fill up that cup a little bit first before you can start pouring it again, and making sure you have enough in reserves so that's not going to be depleting you. And there's lots of ways that this can be done. I think a really good place to start is just looking after your body and your physical health. So minding your body so that your body can mind you. So simple things, you know, like making sure you're getting enough rest, making sure you're eating good, nutritious food, and trying to get out for exercise where you can. And sometimes it really is just as simple as having a good sleep and letting ourselves rest and recharge. You know, that can do us more good than an elaborate pamper session. And also sleeping is free, so that makes it an added bonus as well. Exercise, again, is another great one for lifting our mood. When we exercise, it fills us with endorphins, and then these endorphins help us feel happier. And especially if you can get out into the fresh air to do it, it's just really kind of a positive boost to our days. I think a really important thing to remember at the moment is focusing on what is in our control. And this can be really hard, especially at the moment with COVID. We can spend a lot of time thinking about what could happen, what the outcomes are going to be, you know, how we're going to cope. And when we focus on all those what ifs that ultimately we don't have very much control over, it takes all of our energy and attention away from the things that we can actually control. And when we do this, then it can increase our sense of worry, stress, and anxiety. So, you know, I don't mind even sharing that at the start. I was surrounded by all those what ifs. What's going to happen here? What am I going to do? But really what I found was a massive help was just taking that step back and focusing on, okay, what do I have control over? So, you know, I can't control how busy work is going to be, but I can control, you know, how well I look after myself physically and mentally so that I can keep going even if things are busy. And I think even just by making that simple change in our mindset, you know, it can just be breaking things down into more manageable chunks, so putting us back into the driver's seat. And then we feel a bit more empowered to tackle any challenge just one moment at a time. Seeking support is really different. I know we've mentioned it a good few times about connecting with others, and I'll be talking about it again in a couple of minutes. But I think with societal change and these restrictions that we've all had to live with over the past few months, we haven't had access to our families and normal support networks. And it's really important to try and connect in with those as much as possible. And even if that is online, you know, it's just great to have that sense of connection there. So it's reducing that isolation. and remembering that it's okay to ask for some extra support when you need it and to ask for help. That's natural. And it might even just be about finding different ways to communicate with ourselves and with others. Again, managing boundaries, we've said it before, we can say it a million times because it is so, so important. But as much as possible, trying to keep those, reasonable working hours, that caseload, knowing your limits and knowing how to maintain them. So saying no when, maybe your caseload is full, knowing when to delegate and knowing when to ask for help when that's needed. And then kind of following on for that, finding a way to leave work behind. So having a routine or a ritual, that's something that will allow you to switch off when you leave the building. So that when you actually get a chance to leave and get that rest, that you're able to get that rest. You're able to be home and not be thinking about the work that you've left behind. And I think that's really important to kind of have some time for yourself. Time that's spent doing things that are fun, that are enjoyable, that you enjoy doing. And prioritizing these in your schedule because they are as important as anything else that I've said is there. And finally, about believing in yourself and your own abilities and recognizing the good that you've done over the past year and giving yourself a pat on the back for that. I think, too often we are far too critical of ourselves and what we're doing instead of recognizing how much we have achieved this year and recognizing your ability to keep going forward. Because, believe it or not, believing in ourselves has a huge impact then in how we cope with stress and how we bounce back from difficult times in our lives. And I think this year in particular, when people have been through so much, it's really important to recognize the good things that you have done, no matter whether you work in the wards or in admin or you're a part of a cleaning team or you drive a bus, none of it will be possible without the work that you have been doing. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that going forward. So when we speak of self-care, the one thing we always hear is, I don't have time for self-care, I'm too tired for self-care, I'm too busy, it's just not going to happen. And that makes sense because, when we start feeling busy, stressed or tired, that's the first thing we're going to jump to. But it doesn't necessarily need to be this way. Instead of thinking of it as this big grand gesture, we just need to think of finding a way that it's going to work for us. As much as a spa day would be lovely, it doesn't have to be like that. Sometimes it can be those small practical things which can make a big difference to our days and to our well-being. And one of the ways that this is kind of most easily done is just bringing in some gentle mindfulness into our everyday activities. So, a lot of the time, and I'm so guilty for this, we spend most of our time on autopilot, all of our lives happening in our head, what just happened, what we have to do, and thinking of that to-do list. But we have little thought or awareness of actually what's going on in this present minute, what is actually happening around me. And I think if we're able to bring more of that gentle awareness into our present moment, we can help our mind slow down. We can become more in tune with our body. And as a result, we can de-stress a bit easier. And this can be really simple. So, but the idea of like mindful eating. So when you're going to actually eat something, feeling the taste of the food, the texture, smelling it, and actually, really enjoying that food as opposed to just like eating on autopilot or sitting scrolling on your phone as you're eating. As Ciara mentioned earlier on, that idea of even, washing your hands. So listening to the sound of the water coming out of the tap, feeling the soap in your hands as you're kind of rubbing them together. Washing our hands is something we're all doing more and more of at the moment. So it's that perfect opportunity to try and build that gentle mindfulness back into our day. So I think it'd be really useful, and I'd encourage you to maybe have a think about what activities you could choose to be mindful for each day and try and make a conscious decision to stay in the present moment for that activity, however long it's going to be. So then another really helpful activity is something that can be really easily built into your everyday life. And the best part is no one would even know that you're doing it. So the idea of this is just to focus on our breathing and making sure we're really filling our lungs with some nice, deep, rich, fresh air. Because what happens when we start getting stressed is we stop breathing from our bellies and all of our kind of breathing and air is coming right here. So really light, shallow breathing. So by consciously bringing our breath back to our bellies, it tricks our bodies into turning off that panic stations, that fight or flight response we mentioned earlier on, and just helping us feel a bit calmer. So really, it's a simple idea. The idea is, you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and you hold it for 4 seconds. And we can even give it a go here because I think it's a really nice one. So breathing in through your nose and holding it for 3, 2, 1. Big exhale, 3, 2, 1, and holding it, 3, 2, 1. So really short, you know, you can count in your head, you can think of it as a square if it's easier, but it's something that you can keep practicing, and the more you practice, the easier it becomes, and it feels a bit more helpful during times that are a little bit more stressful. So we mentioned earlier about the importance of connection, and it really plays a vital part in our ability to kind of stay mentally well. And it's something I think that's probably been, you know, had a greater impact this year more than ever. Even the idea of social distancing, it kind of gives the idea of not being connected to others, when in reality it should be physically distancing but socially connected. I think now more than ever it's really important, and it's just about maybe finding new ways to connect with each other. And this is important when we think of family and friends, but it's also in the context of our colleagues and our teams and work. So, you know, the new way of working, if we're working from home, chances are you might be missing out on those normal lunchtime, those tea break chats that would normally help de-stress after a difficult day, and when things are going on. And sometimes this can make it feel that you're on your own and everything feels a bit harder to manage then. So particularly when you're working from home, it's really important to try and think of ways that you can connect with your team and colleagues to make it feel a little bit less isolating. And sometimes it'll mean being a bit more creative. So connecting with people by phone or online. So, you know, instead of your Zoom quiz, we can change it up and have like a Zoom tea break. A Zoom dinner party is also great. You know, everyone can eat what they want and you don't have to cook for them or clean up. So that's also really helpful. And I think it's good to note here as well the importance of reaching out both to give and to receive support. So sometimes it can be hard to reach out. So it's worth thinking, you know, if you notice that someone maybe isn't themselves or is a little bit quieter than normal, you know, just reach out and say hello and ask how they're doing. And sometimes that's all that matters and that's needed. Again, connecting, another form of connection, which is really important and really helpful, is connecting with our values. Now, I know you're probably thinking at this stage, okay, here we go. Here's the wacky psychologist talking, but I promise, hear me out. But if we think of our values kind of like a map or a compass that we can use to help guide our decisions and our actions. So once we know kind of what we value in life, we're able to make decisions and live our lives according to these values. And when we do this, we feel a lot more content and fulfilled in the work that we're doing. So put simply, it can really just help you remind yourself, you know, why you're doing what you're doing. And especially on those difficult days, that can be really helpful. So I would advise you, and I really encourage you to do it either now or at the end of this presentation, just take a few minutes to try and think about and really connect with what's important to you and your values. So what's most important in life, or think about, you know, how would you want people to remember you? What kind of characteristics or what words would you want people to associate with you? What makes life worthwhile? So it could be your family or connecting with others. It could be getting out into nature, and maybe it's traveling. Or maybe it's more kind of personal. Maybe, you know, you really value being honest or having integrity, or you value being able to help others or to share with others. And I think everyone's completely different with this, and that's what makes it so powerful. So once you kind of are able to settle on a few core values that you really represent, you kind of feel that represent you, write them out or print out a picture and stick them in a place that you're really going to see. So on a difficult day or when things get tough, you have those there as a reminder for why you persevere. And why you are doing what you are doing. And just to show that this really does work, you can see here on this next slide, this is something that Ciara had actually done. So I don't know, Ciara, if you want to explain this.
Yeah, so we did in one of our work meetings, we actually did an exercise where we had lots of values cards printed out, and we had to pick, I think we were only meant to pick 3, but I couldn't stop at 3. I had to pick 6 of what was really important to you in life, what you stood for, what was one of your values, and then just sort of reflect on it and talk about it a wee bit. So so you can see mine. I had the printout and I've kind of blue tacked them onto my computer. That's my computer in Thompson House. So you can see there that I think it's hard to read, but appreciation, understanding, a really cheesy one, which I'm now embarrassed about, loved and being loved, loving and being loved. I can't even read them now. Being truthful, accepting yourself and embracing the moment. So I thought it was important to have those on the work computer, and you know, those days where you think, I just can't do this anymore, I'm fed up. It's important to kind of look at those and think, well, what could I do today that would be more in line with one of those values? You know, am I being really hard on myself? How about it just accepting myself? You know, am I thinking too much ahead? Well, what's that one about embracing the moment? Why don't you enjoy the cup of tea and actually pay attention to it while you're having it? So simple things like that can really make a difference to how the rest of your day goes.
Mm-hmm. And I think that really proves the point that it is just about those simple things that you can add into your day that make such a difference.
Yeah.
So We're nearly there. Well, we've spoken about the importance of connecting with others. It's equally as important that we're able to connect with ourselves and just show ourselves some self-compassion. And I think this picture really does a great job of explaining how this happens and why this is so important. So within each of us, we have these three systems. I hope you can see it there, but the drive system, the threat system, and the soothing system. And we need all three of these systems functioning to help us get through the day. So we need the drive system to help motivate us to do our tasks and achieve. We need that threat system to help keep us safe and protect us from danger. And then we need that soothing system to help us feel safe, to rest up, to recharge, and to wind down. So that soothing system, that has a real calming influence on the threat and the drive system. And without that soothing system, those other two systems can become overactive at times and can lead to those really uncomfortable emotions building up. So anxiety, anger, and low mood. So we really need to focus on trying to build up that soothing system and making sure that's of equal weight. And we can do this in a few different ways. One is with others' kindness, but also with self-kindness and self-compassion. I think that's really important. So that means in order to activate that self-soothing system, we need to practice being kind to ourselves. And that means giving ourselves the same kindness that we'd give to a good friend. So there's three main elements to this. Mindfulness, which is, recognizing when we're stressed and maybe when we're struggling with those judgmental or overcritical thoughts. Then self-kindness, so being supportive and understanding to ourselves and when we're having a hard time in particular. And being as caring towards ourselves as we would to others.
I think, Eva, this is really important at the minute, because when I reflect on lots of the conversations I've been having with staff over the last while, there's just that real judgment there that I should be better than this. I feel like I've let everybody down, and I really think it's so important that we need to be kinder to ourselves. Like you say, we've no problems being kind to our patients or clients or family or friends. We need that for ourselves as well.
Absolutely. I think, if we actually go back to that last slide, you can see that last third element of self-compassion is that connection with shared humanity. And I think that really links in there to what you're saying, Ciara. But it's remembering as well that everyone makes mistakes and everyone is going to experience difficult times because we are human and that is how we are made. And we're not alone in that. As humans, we are works in progress. And it's about accepting that, we'll make mistakes, but we'll also achieve great things. And we just need to recognize and reward that.
And if you're struggling at the minute, to recognize that you're definitely not the only one, and I think, again, talking to staff has kind of helped me personally in a way, because when I was struggling with things, you think everybody else is okay and fine and super confident, and they're not experiencing it. And actually talking to people from all areas of the trust and realizing that actually, people aren't all doing okay. It might look like that on the outside. And it's so lovely that people, are brave enough to pick up the phone and talk to us about it. I think that's so important. The helpline's there for staff. It's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, isn't that right? It's confidential. We're there for psychological first aid, because COVID-related stress and anxiety is a big thing for staff at the minute. So, use that resource. And most people say, don't they, that, they're really glad they made the call, or it wasn't as scary as they thought it was going to be. And we're all really nice in the psychology department, aren't we? We're all normal people and nice and easy to talk to. So please do, and recognize that you're not the only one who's experiencing this.
And I think that's the most important thing. We're all going through a pandemic. We're all going through this extraordinary time. I we get it. So it's really important to maybe use that resource if you feel it would be beneficial. So so we can see that people who practice self-compassion are more likely to be happier, less stressed and more resilient, so they can bounce back from setbacks or learn from mistakes. But it's also really helpful for avoiding burnout or compassion fatigue. And we can see here, I won't go into too much detail, but it's something that comes up again and again, and especially for people in the healthcare industry. And compassion fatigue, it's a term thrown around, but that idea of that tiredness, that exhaustion associated with long-term caring for people going through difficult times. But what research has shown that people who practice self-compassion are less likely to experience compassion fatigue, and they're actually more likely to, result in this compassion satisfaction, where you're feeling really energized and feeling like you're able to make a difference. And again, it's that idea coming back to recharging your batteries rather than letting them get depleted. So, I know I'm throwing lots of ideas at you today, but I think I'm hoping, if we give you lots of kind of suggestions, one might jump at you and you can kind of try it out after this, because there are lots of different ways that you kind of build in looking after yourself. And it's just about trying out what's going to work best for you. So this really quickly is a really helpful one. It touches on what was mentioned earlier on. But, you know, there's been a lot of negativity in 2020. It's been a really difficult year for a lot of people, for most people. And it's about maybe trying to refocus how we're thinking about it and try and note maybe 3 positives that have come in 2020 and trying to really incorporate this gratitude into our daily lives. And, you know, whether it's, as we were saying earlier on, when you're leaving work, you know, thinking of 3 difficult things that have happened, 3 challenges, but also then 3 things that have gone well, 3 positives. And this could even be that ritual to help you, you know, leave work behind. So as you're leaving, you're taking a deep breath, grounding yourself and saying, okay, you know, these things, you know, these are a bit tough today, but also I achieved this, this, and this. And, you know, that can be really helpful. And research has shown that's been really beneficial for managing our self-care and managing our well-being. And finally, before we go, I figured, you know, it'd be nice to maybe end on this and give you an idea of what self-compassion really looks like and how easily we can kind of practice this and build this in. So I have a little exercise here if you want to try it out. Hopefully you will, you know, if you feel comfortable to, you know, maybe you want to start by making sure you're sitting comfy in your chair. So like we're doing to start, maybe grounding yourself, feeling your feet on the floor, maybe uncrossing your legs and keeping your hands maybe on your lap. And if you feel comfortable enough to close your eyes, please do. And if you don't, that's okay as well. You can just maybe fix your gaze at the wall or on the floor, somewhere you're not going to get too distracted. And I want you to start by just taking a few deep breaths. So just inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. And just noticing your breath entering and leaving your body. And now I want you to try and bring your attention to your face and bring in a warm facial expression to it. So maybe thinking of someone or something you're fond of and just noticing how that feels as you're holding that warm facial expression. Now I want you to imagine a colour that is calming, soothing, or peaceful. So whatever colour comes to mind, be different for everybody. Just imagine that soothing colour in front of you. Maybe as a light or a mist surrounding you, and just watch as it moves towards you, slowly surrounding you and supporting you. Notice how this feels as it tries to support you, and as it helps you feel soothed, calm, and content. Try and imagine that warm, comforting light entering your body, soothing and calming each area as it moves, and just noticing how that feels in your body. For the next few moments, I'd just like you to sit with that warm colour as it surrounds and encompasses you, bringing with it comfort, kindness, and compassion. And gently bringing your attention back to your breathing. And when you're ready, if you want to bring yourself back into the room, back into this present moment, so maybe taking a moment to open your eyes and readjust to your current environment, whether it's in the office or at home, and maybe just taking a quick shake out after kind of doing that. And just maybe taking a moment to notice how that felt as you were going through that exercise. And hopefully it's something you enjoyed and something you feel that you might be able to build in to your routine and something that, you know, might be helpful. And just like we were saying there about the staff wellbeing, the COVID helpline, we just thought it'd be really important just to highlight the number and the contact details for that. So the number is 028 9250 1332. And as Ciara said, that's open Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We are a lovely bunch, so don't hesitate to call. And, you know, hopefully we'll get speaking to somebody at some point.
Lovely. Thank you, Aoife. That was really lovely. I found that exercise really relaxing. So thank you so much for that. And just finishing up, this is some of the references that we have used to put together this presentation. So some of them may be helpful for you. We would certainly encourage you to have a look at them. And just at the end, we're going to have a very brief poem, which will be read by a couple of primary school children. But just before we do that, just to wish everyone a very happy holiday time off. If you are going to be off from work, we hope you're able to get some rest time, and do look after each other, and stay safe. And so thank you from all of us. Aoife and Ciara, I don't know if there's something maybe you want to say at this stage just before we go to our final poem.
Just thanks for joining us. And it's been, I have to say, it's been a real privilege to work with staff. And we've talked about this before, haven't we? About how lovely it is to get speaking to staff we wouldn't normally do. And it's again going to sound corny and cheesy. This is my night for corny and cheesiness. But I do really proud to work with the people that I've been talking to on the phone, and to work in the South Eastern Trust with all these amazing people. So do look after yourselves. It's really important. And maybe one day we'll be able to do this face to face, and we can have tea and coffee, and we'll look after you with scones and buns. But for now, this is the only way that we can do it, and we really appreciate people taking the time to watch the video.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching this, for taking this time out of your day, and hopefully you find some things useful and you'll be able to kind of look back over it. Yeah, thanks for coming along.
And this poem should come with a government health warning, because it actually had me in tears the first time I heard it. There's something about hearing children's voices, reading poems or singing songs, so get the hankies at the ready.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you everybody, and take good care.
Not everything is cancelled. Sun is not cancelled. Spring is not cancelled.
Relationships are not cancelled. Love is not cancelled.
Reading is not cancelled.
Devotion is not cancelled.
Music is not cancelled. Imagination is not cancelled.
Kindness is not cancelled. Conversations are not cancelled. And hope is not cancelled.
Lovely. And just to say thank you to our young readers, Sean and James, Ben, Lois and Sophia. So stay safe and look after each other. Thank you for watching. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.